On a dusty road in Galilee, a group of tired men came back from a mission still breathless with wonder. And the man they followed said something that had nothing to do with the demons they had just cast out. He looked past them, past the hills, past the moment itself, and he said, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Not, I read it. Not, the prophets wrote it. He said, I saw." As if he had been standing there when it happened, as if the fall of the most radiant being God ever made was a memory he still carried behind his own eyes. The disciples almost certainly did not understand what they had just heard. They had come back talking about power, about spirits that obeyed them the instant they spoke a name, and they were riding the high of it, and into that excitement, he dropped a sentence that reached back before the foundation of the world. As calmly as a man remembering something he had seen with his own eyes that morning. They wanted to talk about what they had done. He was quietly telling them where all of it began. The spirits that had cowered before them that day were the scattered remnant of an army that had once dared to rise against the throne itself. And the one standing in front of them had watched their commander fall. That single sentence is the crack in the floor of everything we assume we understand, because it means the war did not begin in a garden with a serpent coiled around a tree. It began long before the first morning, before the first star ever burned, in a place no human eye has ever seen. And the one telling the story was not a witness who arrived late to it. He was there before it started. We meet Jesus in a manger, and we assume that is where his story opens. It is not. He does not enter history in Bethlehem. He is the origin of history. Before Lucifer had his beauty, before Michael was handed a sword, before heaven had courts and crowns and ranks of ordered light, the Word already reigned in unbroken fellowship with the Father. There was never a version of existence in which he was not already king, already holding all things together by the strength of his own voice. So keep that fixed in your mind, because it bends the shape of the war before the war even begins. The rebellion that is coming was never two powers colliding. It was never a rival god rising up against another god. It was a creature formed and named and sustained, trying to lift itself against the very one who had breathed it into being in the first place. There is a stillness we have to feel here before the noise arrives. A silence before beauty, before rank, before the first song was ever sung by the first choir. In that silence, there was already fellowship, already love passing between the Father and the Son, already a joy that needed nothing added to it and lacked nothing it could want. Whatever the realms above would later become, it was built on the overflow of something that was already complete. That matters, because a king who lacks nothing does not create out of need. He creates out of generosity, and generosity, by its nature, gives real things to real beings, including the terrible gift of a will that can turn. Now carry 3 questions with you, because this story is going to answer all 3, and the last one is going to find you exactly where you are sitting. The first question: why would the Creator form the very enemy he already knew would betray him, when he could read the ending before the beginning had drawn its first breath? The second: why did he not draw a sword when heaven caught fire? Why did the throne stay perfectly still while a third of the angels turned their faces away and marched? And the third, the one that matters more than the other 2 combined. There is a single detail buried inside the sentence that was handed down to the rebel, a quiet detail that then disappears for ages, and reappears much later, centuries down the road, on a hill outside Jerusalem, nailed to a piece of wood. Hold all three of them. We come back to each one at the very end, because this is where the descent begins, and it begins with something almost unbearable to sit with. The angel who would one day raise himself against Jesus was not Jesus's equal. He was not some accident that slipped into a good creation. He was not an ancient darkness that had simply always been there, waiting. The angel who would try to seize the throne of the sun was made by the sun. Every ounce of his strength, every note of his voice, every measure of the beauty he would come to worship in himself was a gift, handed to him by the one he would come to hate. The enemy of that seat owed his every heartbeat to the king upon it. And that, before anything else, is where the true mystery of why Jesus did not intervene finally begins to open. Before he was a name whispered in fear, he was a masterpiece. That is the part the story of evil almost never tells. When the imagination reaches for the devil, it reaches for horns and fire and rot. But that is the ruin, not the origin. In the beginning, he was the high point of angelic craftsmanship, wisdom and splendor woven together and set close to the holy fire, made to stand where the glory of God fell brightest, and to send it back the way still water sends back the sun. Scripture reaches for the language of a guardian to describe what he was, a covering cherub, the kind of being stationed at the very threshold of holiness. Consider what an office like that would have meant. He was not merely one voice lost in a vast choir. He stood where the traffic of worship passed, where the praise of the whole created order moved toward the seat of God, and his task was to guard it, to keep it flowing pure and undivided toward the one it belonged to. He was, in a real sense, the keeper of the worship of the heights, and that is exactly what makes the treason so precise, because the one appointed to protect adoration would become the first to steal it. The guardian of the doorway would try to walk through it and sit down inside. The Scriptures place the whole of creation through the Word. In the Gospel of John it is written that all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. The letter to the Colossians widens that until there is no corner left out. Things in heaven and things on earth, thrones and dominions and rulers and powers, all of it created through him and for him. And that word all does not politely step around the cherub. It includes him. Jesus did not inherit an enemy who was already lurking in the dark. He pronounced that being into existence with his own voice, and he looked at the work and called it good. Now this is where an honest telling has to slow down and refuse to cheat, because this is exactly the place where the shallow channels lie. Two passages get pulled into this story, and honesty demands that three levels be held apart and never blurred. Here is what the text plainly says. On the surface, in their own setting, Ezekiel chapter 28 is a lament against the king of Tyre, and Isaiah chapter 14 is a taunt against the king of Babylon, real, human, historical rulers, addressed by name in their own moment of history. Here is what tradition added. Certain lines in those passages seem to stretch far past any mortal crown. A being who was in Eden, the garden of God. An anointed cherub who covered, a figure blameless from the day he was created, until unrighteousness was found in him. Language like that strained the seams of a human biography. So a long and serious tradition read a fallen power standing behind the human king, using the earthly tyrant as a shadow of an older, higher pride. And here is what remains in honest debate to this day. Careful readers still disagree about how far those verses reach beyond the king standing in front of them. That tension is real, and pretending it is settled would be its own quiet lie. But notice something, because it is the whole point. This telling does not hang on pinning one verse to one demon. It rests on the weight of all of Scripture standing together, and that weight is not in dispute anywhere. There is an enemy. He is a creature, not a rival God. He was not an enemy in the beginning, and pride was the road he walked to become one. Which brings the story to the wound at its center. Jesus did not create a monster. He created a being of staggering purity, handed him a holy purpose, and set him near the fire of the divine presence. That is what makes the fall ache the way it does. The enemy was not born to destroy. He was born to worship. And the sin did not begin the moment he rose against the heights. It began the moment he looked at his own splendor and stopped seeing it as a gift. The light was still real. The beauty was still there, but the direction of the gaze had turned. And in that quiet turning, the whole tragedy was already written. Slow down here, because everything the world imagines about this war gets the sequence wrong. It pictures swords first. It pictures armies and thunder and a sky torn in half. But before a single blade was drawn, before one word of rebellion was ever spoken aloud, there was only a thought. Silent, private, growing in the one place a creature believes no one else can ever follow, except one gaze had followed it there from the start. The prophet uses a strange and haunting phrase. He says that unrighteousness was found in him till iniquity was found in you. Found, not announced, not declared, not broadcast across heaven. Found the way something is found that has been quietly growing in the dark long before it ever broke the surface. The rebellion had a hidden life before it had a public face. And the terrible thing is that the hidden life was never once hidden from Christ. Picture this scene with me for a moment, because it is the quietest and most frightening image in the entire story. A perfect being stands in perfect light, and inside him, where he believes he is utterly alone, a small comparison begins. Gratitude cools by a single degree. Wonder tilts, just slightly, from the giver toward the gift. Worship, still flawless on the outside, starts to curve inward. And the Word who made him watches every micro motion of it, the way one would watch a hairline crack spread across glass too precious to shatter yet. The 5 statements the prophet records are usually read as a cold little list. They are not a list, they are a staircase. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the assembly. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Read them slowly, and the climb becomes almost physical. He wants to rise, then to rule, then to be seen, then to be enthroned, then, at the summit, to take the one seat that was never his to take. And notice what is missing from every rung of that staircase. There is no argument anywhere in it. He never accuses God of a single wrong. He never points to an injustice, never names a cruelty, never claims he was mistreated or overlooked. There is no grievance in the entire record, because there was none to be had. His fall was not a response to being wronged. It was a hunger that grew inside a being who had been handed everything, and still fixed on the one thing that was not his to hold. That is the loneliest kind of ruin there is. A discontent with no cause behind it, a wound with no injury underneath it, a fire that fed on nothing but its own reflection. And here is the angle the surface never notices. Pride did not fall on him from the outside like a bolt of lightning. It rose from within like a reflection. The very gifts that made him glorious became the polished surface, where he fell in love with his own face. He was made to be a mirror for the glory of God, and he simply turned the mirror around. The wisdom was real. The beauty was real. That is precisely what made them so dangerous, because a lie is never so convincing as when it is built entirely out of true things. So the war did not start with a rival. It started with a reflection. Not with hatred at first, but with a fascination that forgot to look up. And through all of it, the word said nothing. That silence is almost the hardest part of the whole account to sit with. He did not interrupt the first proud thought with a warning shot. He did not send another angel to reason him back. He watched a beloved creature lay the foundation of his own destruction thought by thought, and he let the building rise. Not because he was distant or indifferent, precisely because he was not. Some things have to be allowed to become fully what they are before anyone can ever be shown why they had to end. And this is the part that should stop the breath. The mystery is not that Jesus saw it. Of course he saw it. He sees everything. The mystery, the thing that will take the rest of this account to unfold, is that Jesus saw it and let it continue. He could have ended it in an instant. That has to be said plainly, because everything after, it depends on it. In the first flicker of that first proud thought, before it hardened into intention, the Word who was holding Lucifer in existence could have simply stopped holding. No battle, no drama. A being unmade as quietly as a candle is pinched out between two fingers. The power was never the question. The power was total, and it was never once in doubt. So why not? Why let a cancer that he could see with perfect clarity go on spreading through the ranks of heaven? Because of what obedience would have meant if he had. Imagine a heaven where the first hint of dissent was instantly erased. Every angel that remained would go on worshipping, yes, but they would worship the way a hand obeys a threat. They would have seen, in one flash, what happens to anything that dares to question, and they would fold. And not one of them would ever again know the difference between love and fear. Their praise would be flawless and hollow. Adoration at the point of a sword is not adoration. It is survival wearing the costume of worship. God did not make angels as machines for producing praise. He made them as beings capable of love. And love, real love, cannot exist without a real alternative. Where there is genuine love, there must be genuine choice. And where there is genuine choice, there hangs the terrible, dignifying possibility of refusal. Take away the possibility of no, and the yes stops meaning anything at all. There is a picture that makes this almost unbearably clear. A voice that has been built to say the words "I love you" is not exactly lying when it says them. But it is not loving either, because nothing in it could ever have chosen otherwise. The words are real, and the meaning is hollow at the very same time. If God had made a heaven where refusal was impossible, that is precisely what he would have made. A universe of flawless voices, saying all the right words with nothing living behind them. He wanted sons, not recordings. He wanted a worship that could have walked away and stayed anyway. And a world like that cannot exist without also leaving room for the heartbreak of the ones who would walk away and never come back. And this is the staggering thing the permission quietly reveals about God himself. He was willing to be rejected. He built into his own creation the real possibility of his own heartbreak. And he did it with open eyes, knowing the full cost before the first no was ever spoken. A smaller God would have protected himself, would have made refusal impossible, and called it order. The true God made room for the wound. He weighed the rebellion, the fall, the ruin of a third of heaven, and he decided that a creation capable of real love was worth the risk of real loss. That one decision would carry him, in time, all the way to a cross. But it started here, in the choice to let an angel say no. So the permission was not weakness. It only looks like weakness from the outside, the way a surgeon's stillness looks like cruelty to someone who does not understand the cut. The Creator allowed the rebellion to rise, to gather, to speak, so that its true nature could stand fully exposed in the open, in view of every watching creature, condemned by what it actually was, rather than merely crushed before anyone could see what it had become. And here is the conviction: this story will not soften. Jesus did not permit the rebellion because he lost his grip on it. He permitted it because evil had to be revealed before it could be righteously judged. A verdict handed down against a hidden thing teaches nothing to the ones who never saw the crime. But a rebellion allowed to run its full course, to make its promises and break them, to reach for a crown and fall, becomes a lesson written across the memory of the universe forever. He was not reacting. He was not scrambling to recover. He was allowing the poison to name itself out loud, so that when the sentence finally came, all of heaven would know exactly why it was just. The stillness was not absence. The patience was not defeat. The restraint of the one who could have ended it in a heartbeat was all along a form of justice too vast to be rushed. And Lucifer, mistaking that patience for opportunity, was about to make his silent pride very, very loud. Something shifted in him, and it changed the entire war. For a long time, the pride had been a private affair, a solitary being in love with his own reflection. But pride rarely stays alone. It gets lonely at the top of a lie, and it goes looking for company. Lucifer stopped merely wanting the crown and started working to convince others that they wanted it too. This is where the enemy shows his real genius, and it is worth staring at, because it is the same craft he practices still. He did not come to the angels as a brute. He did not raise a fist or bear a weapon. He came as the most persuasive voice the heights had ever heard. He was, after all, built for beauty and for nearness to the fire of the presence, and he turned every gift of communication he possessed into an instrument of seduction. He offered the other angels a freedom that sounded like a gift and was really a hook. Greatness without submission, glory without obedience, a crown with no knee bent to earn it. And here is the cruelty folded inside the offer. Every angel he approached had in that moment a real memory of joy. They knew what it was to serve, and to discover that the serving was not slavery at all, but gladness. Lucifer had to talk them out of something they had actually tasted. So he did what every deceiver after him would learn to do. He renamed it. Obedience became limitation. Reverence became weakness. The joy of a creature delighting in its creator was recast as a cage, and freedom was quietly redefined as the right to answer to no one. He did not offer them a better master. He offered them the end of the very idea of a master, and he wrapped that emptiness in the language of a crown. And notice the exact shape of the first lie ever told in existence, because it is not the lie most people would guess. The first lie was not that God does not exist. That is a modern and clumsy thing compared to the original. The first lie was subtler and far more deadly. It was, in essence, that you do not need him in order to be complete. You are already enough on your own. The reverence you keep giving him is beneath a being as glorious as you. That whisper was not born in Eden. It was not first spoken to a woman beside a tree. It was born in heaven in the mouth of an angel before a single human being had ever drawn breath. The oldest lie in the universe is older than the human race itself. And it worked. That is the sober horror of it. A third of the angelic host did not fall by accident, did not get swept up in a confusion they never chose. They heard the offer. They weighed it. They desired it. They agreed to it. Every one of them made a decision. Heaven, the very place of perfect order, witnessed the first moral division in the history of creation, a fault line running straight through the ranks of light. Some faces still turned upward. Some now turned toward the beautiful voice, promising them a throne of their own. There was no violence yet. Not one sword had left its sheath. It was still only words, still only a campaign of whispers, moving quietly from rank to rank. But a campaign of whispers is already a kind of war that has not yet confessed what it is. And then the whisper stopped being a whisper. The private seduction became a public challenge, spoken openly, in the one place where no lie could pretend to be anything other than treason, directly in front of the throne. And in that instant, heaven went to war. Now the sky itself splits open. The book of Revelation pulls back a curtain on a war that was fought before our world even had a name. And it is written that war broke out in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fighting back. Michael, the great captain of the faithful host, raises his sword. The dragon rises with the ones who followed him. Light against corrupted light, loyalty against ambition, across a battlefield with no ground beneath it and no sky above it. And every instinct tells us to fix our eyes on the clash of the two armies. But the real revelation is not in the fighting. It is in where Jesus is not. He is not on the battlefield. He does not descend to trade blows with Lucifer. He does not meet the dragon sword to sword. He commissions Michael and remains exactly where he has always been, seated, unmoved, upon the throne. To every shallow eye that looks like a retreat, it is the precise opposite. It is the single most revealing detail in the entire war. Here is the distinction that lifts this whole story from mildly interesting to unforgettable. Michael was fighting with angelic strength. Jesus was operating with creational authority. Those are not two amounts of the same thing. They are not 2 points on one scale where Jesus simply happens to have more. They are 2 different categories of reality altogether. Michael could win a battle. Only the Creator could hold up the very stage the battle was being fought upon. Even Michael's name is a question thrown like a spear. It means, Who is like God? He carried the answer to the whole rebellion embedded in his own name, a living challenge to the entire premise of the mutiny. But even Michael, mighty as he was a servant swinging a sword that had been handed to him. He fought under orders, with strength that had been given to him, on a field that another was holding open beneath his feet. The captain of the loyal host was magnificent, and the captain of the loyal host was still a creature. The distance between the greatest angel and the sun was never a matter of degrees of power. It was the distance between the made and the maker, and no amount of angelic strength could ever close a gap of that kind. Picture the whole scene held inside a single frame. In the foreground, chaos. Swords of light meeting swords of shadow, ranks breaking and reforming, the dragon roaring, the loyal host pressing him back, and in the background, unmoved, a throne. No motion on it at all, no alarm, no leaning forward to see how the thing would end. Only a presence so vast that the raging war in the front of the picture was in truth a small event happening inside a hand that could have closed at any second. The rebels fought as though the whole of everything hung in the balance. Nothing hung in the balance. The outcome had never once been uncertain, because the one who could unmake existence itself had simply chosen, for reasons entirely his own, to let the lesson finish. Consider what the throne was doing in that very moment, while the swords crossed. Billions of galaxies did not drift out of orbit. The laws that hold the smallest particles together did not so much as flicker. Every star that Lucifer wanted to climb above went on burning at the exact temperature it had been told to burn. The tides of a world not yet made were already written into the future he was sustaining. The true battle of Jesus was never against Lucifer at all. His true and unbroken war was against the collapse of everything, holding the entire weight of existence perfectly steady while a mutiny screamed at the foot of his chair. And here is the paradox that should never be forgotten once it has been seen. Satan was only able to fight at all because Jesus was, in that very instant, still granting him the existence to fight with. The rebel raised his weapon, using a life that was on loan from his enemy. Every second he spent trying to overthrow the Creator was actively keeping him alive enough to try. He could not draw a single breath to curse the seat that the one upon it was not, at that same moment, choosing to give him. So let it be said plainly what the battle actually proved. The war did not prove that Satan was strong. It proved that the patience of Jesus was terrifyingly deep. He did not need to strike, because the very existence of his enemy already hung on his will. His stillness was not the absence of power. It was power so complete that it had nothing left to prove. Michael won a battle in the sky that day, but the throne had never been in danger for a single instant, and the one seated upon it had not so much as leaned forward. And now the sentence from Galilee comes back, and it lands with a weight it could not have carried at the start. When Jesus stood among those tired disciples and said he had watched Satan fall like lightning from heaven, he was not reciting some piece of old tradition he had inherited. He was not quoting a scroll. He was giving eyewitness testimony to a cosmic event from the only witness who had been present for the whole of it. And the language hides something most readers walk straight past. In the original Greek, the word for seeing there is not a casual glance, not the way a person half notices something across a crowded room. It leans toward the sense of watching with full attention, of taking something incompletely rather than catching it in passing. Jesus did not merely catch a glimpse of the fall. He beheld it fully, every cause and every consequence, the pride and the persuasion, and the war and the verdict, all of it held in a single sovereign gaze. And then the fall itself. Lightning. Weigh the word he chose. Not a slow decline, not a gradual slipping out of favor. Lightning, speed and violence and total humiliation compressed into an instant. One moment the highest of all the creatures stood in the light, near the seat of God. The next he was falling, and there was no negotiation on the way down, no appeal, no pause for terms. When a creature stands face to face with its creator and demands the creator's own seat, there is nothing left to discuss. There is only the immediate, catastrophic collapse of the lie he had built. And the geometry of it is its own kind of sermon. He wanted to climb above the stars. He ended by falling past them. He wanted to ascend above the heights. He was cast down below the very things he had come to despise. He reached for the seat of the one who made the stars, and he fell like a struck bolt in front of the one who had made those stars with a word. The higher the reach, the longer the fall, and no creature has ever reached higher or fallen farther. But there is a reason this testimony matters far beyond the drama of it, a reason that reaches all the way forward to a cross. Jesus was not an optional witness to the origin of evil. He was a necessary one. To engineer the rescue of a fallen world, he first had to have seen, with perfect clarity, exactly how the fall began. He had to watch pride destroy the strongest creature ever made in order to understand precisely how humility would one day save the weakest. The one who would descend to save had already watched the one who tried to ascend to steal. He knew the disease from the inside of its very first case. And there is something staggering about the timing of that testimony. The man speaking those words in Galilee had feet caked with the same dust the disciples walked on. He was tired. He would soon be hungry and thirsty, and in the end he would bleed. And yet the one living inside that dust and that hunger was the same one who had watched the highest angel fall before the world was ever made. Eternity was speaking through a voice the road had made hoarse. The witness of the beginning was standing right in the middle of the rescue he had planned from the start, wearing the weakness of the very ones he had come to save, carrying the memory of the fall in the same eyes that would soon close in death and open again on the third day. So the enemy was down, cast out of the heights, hurled from the place he had coveted, stripped of the station he was born to fill. It looked from every angle like the end of him. It was not, because Satan fell from heaven, still holding the one weapon that would prove more dangerous than any sword he had lost. He fell still holding the right to accuse. The fighting was over, but the story was not, because a war and a verdict are two different things. The book of Revelation says the dragon was cast out, and his angels with him, and there was no longer any place found for them in heaven. But before that expulsion could mean anything at all, someone with the authority to pronounce it had to rise. And so the Son rose from the throne, not to fight. That was already finished. He rose to sentence. This is a thing that only the Creator can do, because only the one who made a creature holds true authority over what becomes of it. No angel could banish another angel. No court of created beings could try a crime of this magnitude. The judgment had to come from the source of the very life that had been abused. And look closely at the shape of the sentence, because every part of it is deliberate. It was banishment, not annihilation. He did not erase the rebels from existence, though he easily could have, and the reason is its own strange mercy turned inside out. To annihilate them would have been too quick, an ending without the long exposure of what evil truly is. To imprison them only briefly would have hinted at some coming restoration, some parole. Instead, there was definitive expulsion from the courts of heaven, a clean and permanent removal of exactly the third that had corrupted itself, no more and no less. It was surgery, not vengeance, cutting out the diseased tissue with perfect precision and leaving the rest of the heavenly host whole. But here is the detail the earlier testimony planted, the one that refuses to stay buried. The expulsion from heaven was only partial in its effect. Satan lost his place, but he did not lose his function. He was thrown down from the courts, yet he carried the role of accuser down with him. The sentence had a first half that was executed at once, and a second half that would not be carried out for ages, on a hill, on a piece of wood, far from any hall of judgment. That word, accuser, is not decoration. It is the oldest name for what he became. Long after the fall, the scriptures still show him standing in a kind of courtroom, pointing at the faithful, cataloguing their failures, demanding the penalty that guilt truly does deserve. That was the weapon he kept. Not a sword, but an argument. Not raw force, but the law itself, which he had learned to turn against the very ones it was meant to protect. He could no longer storm the throne, so he would work the court instead. And the terrible thing was that his accusations were often perfectly true. The people he pointed at really had sinned. The debt he named really was owed. His power was never that he lied about the guilty. His power was that he told the truth about them, and then demanded they be destroyed by it. Cast out of heaven, the rebel went looking for a new arena. If he could not seize the seat above, he would strike at the thing the king loved below. And when God shaped a man and a woman and set them in a garden, the serpent came with the very same venom that had destroyed him, dressed now in words fitted for human ears. You will be like God. It was the old lie exactly, the same whisper that had first curved his own worship inward, now poured into a new and fragile vessel. But this time, the lie carried a flaw that was fatal to the one telling it. And here is the conviction this film will stake its name on. Satan made a mistake in Eden. In dragging humanity down into his own ruin, he did not close his trap. He opened the door. By pulling man into the fall, he handed the Son a reason and a righteous legal way to descend. He thought he was spreading his rebellion. He was, without knowing it, laying the road for his own undoing. The accuser had just given the judge a courtroom, and now everything the story opened with comes back to be paid in full. 3 questions were set down at the very start, and not one of them was left behind. Why did the Creator form the enemy he knew would betray him? Because love that cannot refuse is not love, and he would rather risk the rebellion than reign over a court of machines. Why did he not draw a sword when heaven caught fire? Because he never needed one. The existence of his enemy hung on his will the entire time, and a king who is already holding his opponent's very life in his hand does not reach for a weapon. And the detail in the sentence that vanished for ages. It was the second half of the verdict, the accuser's right to condemn, And it reappeared exactly where the story said it would, on a cross outside Jerusalem. The thesis holds all the way through. The position was the weapon. The stillness of the throne was never absence and never fear. It was the strategy of a God patient enough to let evil reveal itself completely before he answered it fully. Michael won a battle in the sky. Jesus would win the war on the earth. Not with a sword, but with a cross. Not by destroying the rebel in the moment of his pride, but by dismantling his one remaining weapon, tearing from the accuser the legal right to condemn everyone who belongs to Christ. The lightning fall that Jesus once watched from his seat became the avalanche fall that Jesus executed at Calvary. On that hill, the second half of the sentence was finally carried out, and the accuser lost the only power he had left. Because on that cross, something happened that the accuser never saw coming. The debt he kept pointing to was paid in full, by the only one in all of creation who did not owe it. When Jesus took the penalty that guilt deserved and carried it in his own body, the accusation went silent. Not because the charges had turned out to be false, but because they had already been answered. The scriptures say he disarmed the rulers and authorities and made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. Disarmed. The weapon was lifted straight out of the accuser's hand. He could still point at the guilty, but he could no longer demand their death, because the death had already been died by another, and the record that stood against them had been nailed to the wood and left hanging there. And look at how the whole thing inverts, because the symmetry of it is almost unbearable. Lucifer wanted to ascend, and he fell. Jesus chose to descend, and he was exalted. Lucifer reached to seize a throne, and lost the one he had. Jesus surrendered himself to a cross, and was given every throne there is. Lucifer sought glory for himself, and was emptied of it. Jesus poured out his life to save others, and was filled with all the glory of heaven. The one who grasped, lost. The one who gave, received everything. So the mystery that opened this whole account finally closes. Jesus did not step in and stop the rebellion, in the way we always imagine intervention, because that kind of intervention would have solved nothing and taught no one. He did not need to win a fight. He was never once in danger of losing. He was playing a longer game, a game that ran from a single silent thought in a perfect heart all the way to an empty tomb. And every move of it was aimed at one thing, not the destruction of an enemy he could have unmade with a word, but the rescue of everyone that enemy would try to drag down with him. The throne stayed perfectly still, so that grace could travel all the way down to the ground. And here is where this stops being ancient history. The same Jesus who held the universe together through the mutiny is holding your existence together right now, in this very moment, as you sit and breathe and listen. The throne that did not move during the war has not moved for you either. The enemy was never once beyond the reach of that throne, and neither is anything that has its grip on you tonight. So let one honest question sit with you before this ends. Where in your own life have you been trying to ascend on your own strength, to climb some throne by the force of your own will? The very move that destroyed the strongest angel ever made. Leave your answer below, because someone else scrolling past needs to read that they are not the only one. Because the point of all of it was never only to explain a war in heaven. It was to show you the one who was at the center of it. The same throne that never moved during the rebellion has never once moved away from you, no matter how far you have wandered from it. And that throne is not asking you to climb. It is inviting you to come home. If something in you is stirring right now, do not let the moment pass in silence. Type these words where they can be read and mean them from the depth of you. Lord Jesus, I surrender to you. You are the only Savior of my life. There is no throne you need to seize, because the only one that ever mattered already stepped down from his to reach you. Surrender is not the losing of your life. It is the finding of it. Write it, believe it, and belong to the one who never once left his seat and never once stopped reaching for you.